Welcome everybody this morning, and this is a little bit different than what we've normally done. We've normally had joint House and Senate hearings and for the big issues and the main issues of the budget, and then have broken up into smaller groups and subcommittees, and then the Senate's had their hearings and we've had ours, and there will probably be some of that, but for today, we're having public safety hearings here, and it's a joint Senate and House hearings, and we've got, as part of it, because of the fact that some of the functions of the Senate and the House overlap, we've got the House Public Safety Committee that will be having hearings in this room all day today, and then Senator Calvert's committee will be with us for the morning, part of the morning, and then Senator Crosby's, and then Senator Carter's. So the Senate breaks theirs up a little bit different than ours, but we will have our colleagues here, and it will be truly a joint hearing, so everybody participates at any time that they feel like it. And it's fast and furious, but it's still going to be comprehensive. Now, our marching orders are to deal with the 14 amended. But at the same time, we also feel like that if there is not a lot of difference between the 14 amended and the 15, that rather than bringing agencies back to answer one question on maybe one difference in the 15, that if we can deal with 14 and 15 on some of those where there's not a whole lot of difference, that for economy of time, that will make some sense. So if the Senate and the House tracking sheets are a little bit different, so we may have some different numbers or something like that, but we're going to try to keep all of those things together. But Brian, where are you? Is he? If you'll give out the 15 tracking sheets to the House members, so that if they haven't already got them. Okay, we don't have the 15 tracking sheets yet. Okay. But anyway, so if anybody has any questions about the 15, as long as we aren't straying too far off time, then we will do that. We're going to hear a little bit from the Court of Appeals first of all this morning, and but before we do, I'm going to ask Senator Calvert if he wants to have some opening remarks.
Really don't have much to add other than we're glad to have you all here this morning. We think that the supplemental will be pretty quick, not too complicated. We've reviewed all of the requests and what the governor's recommendations are on different things. So just educate us as much as you can on any differences or changes. Thanks.
Okay, Court of Appeals. Judge, glad to have you with us.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to appear before you. And
those mics should be on. If you'd pull that mic in front of you, please, Judge.
okay. All right. Let me introduce. It's not on yet.
Yes. Is the light on?
Let's try.
Okay, I can hear you.
It's on.
Thanks, sir.
All right. First, let me introduce our new clerk court administrator, Steve Castlin. He's been with us since September 1st. He spent 32 years in the military preparing for this job, and so we're glad to have him. And we have our fiscal officer, Jan Kelly, that you already know, and former Chief Judge John Ellington. I think you might know him. So we're happy to be here, and our requests, as you see, we are asking for a total in additional funds of $713,983. We have four changes. We're asking for 2 central staff attorneys, and we're asking for 1 floating documents clerk for the clerk's office, and there's also a change for funding for increased teamwork financial system. That adds about $14,000 plus to our budget, and also the request due to the ERS retirement rate increase. Now, on the floating staff attorneys, in 2008 we had to lay off 5 attorneys. We have gotten one of those back, and the floating central staff attorneys, they deal with jurisdictional matters, discretionary and interlocutory matters, and also they float in chambers when there's an emergency, and there's always some emergency. Someone's out on maternity leave or illness or some other event. I just learned this morning that we have a chambers attorney who's going to have to be out for 12 weeks because her son was in a serious automobile accident over the weekend. So those things come up, and there's no way to plan for them except to have the personnel available to fill in those slots. And what's going to happen is somebody from central staff is going to have to help out in those chambers. And when we do that, that weakens central staff. Now, we had asked for $110,000 for these two positions, and the reason we did that is that when we laid off these attorneys, that's the rate they were at, and we would like to have them back because of their experience. This is complicated work dealing with jurisdictional matters and other matters, and it's time sensitive dealing with the discretionary and interlocutory matters. And if we could, we would like to hire attorneys who already have the experience in central staff and also have the experience in chambers from having floated in chambers when they were with us. So that was the reason for that. Of course, that is not the entry-level salary, but we asked for what it would take to have these attorneys come back at the level at which they left. And the clerk's office has a need for a documents clerk. You know, we've gone to e-filing, but so far, you know, that deals with briefs and motions and that kind of thing. The records are still coming in paper because we don't have the capability. As you know, we got 159 counties, and some are more technologically advanced than others, but we still have a lot of documents and paperwork to handle in the clerk's office. So that is the reason for those things, those requests, and the other items are things that sort of mandatory. We don't have any choice but to ask for those items. But that's where we are, and we'd appreciate your consideration. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have for me or the clerk or the fiscal office.
I'm going to do something a little bit different, I think. We aren't hearing from the Supreme Court for another hour or so, but they are here. And I understand that they are asking for some money to change the platform for e-filing. Is that right? And are y'all on the same platform that they're on?
Well, I think we are on a similar platform. We've had discussions with the Supreme Court. Justice Melton and Judge Doyle from our court have met and discussed that extensively. And what has been reported to me is that the Supreme Court is considering moving to Microsoft, and that it's better for everybody if the Court of Appeals stays with our current server. And if the Supreme Court moves ahead with this, and at some later time, if we decide that we need to make that move, we'll be able to do that without a great expense. But at this time, the Court of Appeals and everyone is in agreement on this based on discussions between the two courts,
right,
that we will stay with our current server.
All right, let me ask Justice Melton.
I just want to be clear. I agree with everything that Chief Judge Phipps just said. I want to be clear. We're not talking about the platform for e-filing. This is more of the platform for basic office operations. So the emailing system, documents, those kinds of things has nothing to do with the e-filing operations itself.
Okay.
So for that, we're trying to migrate off of Novell to Microsoft, and that requires us to build a new backbone to attach all these things to that currently Novell is attached to. And then if at a later date the Court of Appeals wants to transfer over from Novell into Microsoft, they'll be able to link on our system with very little cost. Because we're built on a different platform and switch, we would need to build that different platform and then support Microsoft.
So if we let you lead the way, it's not going to cost us anything for them to come on board?
It won't cost much.
It won't cost us anything?
Not nearly as much as what we're paying right now. We're asking for like 300. I think they'd probably be able to migrate for 30 to 40.
Thank you, Justice Melton. All right, are there any questions for the Court of Appeals? Thank you, sir.
I have a question
Okay.
I would like to ask. I understand that y'all had a few things that have changed over there, that the Honorable Judge Ellington has gotten married in the last several months.
I got another mouth.
Does that mean that now he will be working out of his home down in South Georgia?
He's been working
Yes.
out of his home.
Yes, we have a branch of the Court of Appeals down in Soperton.
Well, we used to have a branch in Mableton, but now
That's right. Thank you very much. Is that it? We appreciate seeing you.
Okay, Judicial Council.
That includes the benefits too, so you can probably figure 35 or so, and then half of it's benefits. That would be about right.
Good morning.
Well, Justice Melton will give facts and figures along with the AOC Director Marvel Moore. Justice Melton is, for the Judicial Council, sort of the fiscal person. He's the one through which all of the figures are filtered. And they know far more about this than I do, so I think rather than me filtering what I know about it, you need to just get it directly from the original source. But I'm willing to stand with them and vouch for them.
So we'll have to swear him in now.
No, just swear me in.
All right, we're talking about Judicial Council budget, and my guess is that we, as far as some of the issues on Judicial Council on the 15th, that we will probably have another hearing because you've got some technology issues that are a little bit more complicated than we can deal with this morning. So we'll probably stick strictly with the 14th Amendment amended on the Judicial Council. Okay, if y'all would go through with the changes, please.
I'll let Director Moore get us started.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here again, representatives and senators. In addition to the Chief Justice, who is the chair of our Judicial Council, and Justice Melton, who is chairing our Budget Committee, we also have presiding Justice Hines here, who is the vice chair of the Judicial Council. I very much appreciate them being here. Ashley Garner is also here, and she has provided you with some handouts that we will be, we will be referring to as we go through. I have several things that I could say about all the good things that we're doing this year, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip right over to what our enhancement requests are. And you have a handout which outlines those. And there are several. We have been in sort of a shrinking mode, as you know, for some years, and sort of plateaued a little bit last year, although we shrunk a little bit more. So there are some projects and things that are really coming to the fore. We represent a lot of groups within our Judicial Council budget, and so we have several requests there. The reason that they are presented to you as they are here in a numerical order is because the Judicial Council, realizing that there are quite a few requests here, decided that they would give a priority to this list. So we're going to be talking about them this morning in the priority that the Judicial Council has adopted. First and foremost, which is not in the Judicial Council AOC operations budget, but which is in the whole Judicial Council budget, is the Institute of Continuing Judicial Education. Our judges are very concerned that judicial education be a #1 priority. We came to you, and I don't believe there's anyone here from ICJU this morning, but I am a board member, so I'm speaking with both hats on this one. We came to you with a request for this year of a little over $30,000. You funded about $10,000. This money that was needed is really infrastructure needs. The $10,000 that we did receive has been used to upgrade software licenses, but we have some additional hardware needs that we need the additional $20,580 for, and that's why this is here. If there are any questions about that, then I will move on to our Accountability Court Committee. And the chair of our Judicial Council Accountability Court Committee is Judge Brenda Weaver from the Appalachian Circuit. I'm sure that most, if not all of you, know her. She has been heading up the committee, which has worked very hard over the last 2 years, meeting the statutory requirements that you put on the Judicial Council to develop standards, to develop a certification process for funding, and to develop a peer review process to ensure that these courts are maintaining standards and doing the best job they can. We're very proud of these courts. But in this fiscal year, you took away one of the 3 positions that we had working on this. Now, through some austerity measures within my office, we have cobbled together some funds to move forward and continue to support this, but we're getting ready to go out and do the peer review process, which is going to be judges, but also has to be staff. In order to do that, we very sincerely need to have that position restored. And so we're asking that it be restored at the same level that it was when we had it in the previous fiscal year. Are there any questions?
I got a question
Yes.
on that. You come on over there too.
Okay, yours stays on.
I'm curious of the cost of that one position we're talking about adding on. What is the salary of that person and the benefits?
Salary and benefits total $78,806.
That's
So
for a full year.
That's for a full year. We're asking for a quarter of the year in this fiscal year, and then our 15 request would have a position for the whole year.
Thanks.
Okay, Representative Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your thoughtfulness, and I appreciate the way you organize this. It makes it very easy to follow.
Thank you.
The Accountability Court Committee, if I could just ask about that, how many accountability courts do we have operating at this time in the state?
We're right at 100, I think. And
Wow.
I'm sorry, Latifah, can you? Latifah Thomas is here as well. I neglected to introduce her. She is the program manager that works with the accountability courts. She's a distressed staff person who really would appreciate having some additional help.
Including our division, which includes the courts, the mental health court, also including our civil child support court, our juvenile court, and our family dependent court, and that's approximately 120.
Let me just pose a question. Now, the child support courts, is that when, tell me what that means. Do you have a specific judge that's set aside other than the superior courts? Tell me, I guess I'm not sure. I hadn't seen this quite yet.
Yeah, no, these are handled by a superior court judge.
Okay.
It probably acts more like a calendar than
Okay.
a court.
That's child support enforcement, and when they meet at the courthouse with the superior court judge, that's
Brings
what
them
you're
all
referring
together.
to, is that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so we got a lot more of
Sorry,
those
I
to.
do have some superior court judges here, and they may be able to explain that better.
Oh, I think I got an understanding for that. I think, okay.
Probably does there. I'm Lisa Abbott. I'm president of the Council of Superior Court Judges. These child support courts that we're talking about are accountability courts. They're problem-solving courts. And judges have created these courts that are different from the usual child support courts that you're probably thinking about. There's follow-through, there's job placement, there's legitimation of children so that people feel more accountable. There's a lot more monitoring, and typically these are folks who are way behind.
I think it does. Thank you. And one other question that I'd like to pose to you is, not every county in the state has for example, the accountability courts, like what we refer to as the child support courts. Is there do you have an intended? Do you know what the rollout of those will be, in any time frame? Has that been something that's contemplated here?
I don't believe that as far as a rollout. I mean, the goal is to have accountability courts as needed throughout the state. And as funding is available, as these courts come on, I mean, it requires resources within the community as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into establishing them. We have teams that are helping startup courts. There's resources that are available, and so we're working through that as developing the standards, developing the certification, and then the peer review.
Okay, who's 25? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure on the excuse me, accountability courts, not being an attorney, but I want to know the effect, because I do know that I get a huge amount of calls, especially outside of my district, from people who cannot get the courts to move on child support issues. And there's always a backup, it seems like, and being in a military district, we know it's particularly hard when we have people leaving and crossing state lines. But tell me, how much will it help to have what you're asking for? Because I just find it terrible that people can't collect child support that the courts have ruled on. Does this have any effect on it at all?
This position is focused, and what the Judicial Council is currently focused on are the adult felony courts, drug and mental health. That's the primary focus. We have another initiative, and if I might again call on Judge Abbott, who is very much involved in sort of the statewide efforts on child support. She might be able to answer your question better than I.
I'm happy to address the question. It's distressing to all of us. Once the court orders child support, that it doesn't get paid. One of the big effects of accountability courts is to move people into positions where they can be accountable to their children, to their families, and to work. That's one of the hidden benefits of all this. A lot of, and I'm not trying to be, I want to be gender neutral, but there are a lot of men who have felony convictions, and it is hard to get a job. And many of them have been under a child support order while they're in prison. And as you, I'm sure, know, we're not allowed to modify child support amounts downward because of someone being in prison or unable to pay. And I don't agree with that law, it's a Supreme Court ruling. But a huge goal, and I think incredibly successful achievement with accountability courts, is that people are working. The graduation rates from felony drug courts, mental health courts, veterans courts, all of those have an impact on folks' ability to get a job. Most communities are incredibly supportive. It took a while for everybody to get on board with accountability courts, but now I think people are seeing the results and the benefits. Do we still have an issue in Georgia in collecting child support? Absolutely. There's, I think, 500,000 open cases in the state of Georgia. I'm the president of the Child Support Commission as well, and we're working on a number of those issues to ensure that there's equity for everyone. Enforcement will remain an ongoing issue until we can get people back to work and hold them to that and supervise them. And that's the idea. Is that they have to come in and report to a judge every week. And the carrot and the stick. If you do well, we'll continue to work with you. If you don't do well, then unfortunately there are going to be consequences for that. So this is probably one of the most important initiatives in the state of Georgia in the last 10 years to adequately fund the creation of accountability courts. We are working hard to answer the question about rollout. It depends on having a judge who's willing to do it, to take this on, and we have lots who are willing to do this. Number two, you gotta have housing. When you're talking about poor, rural communities in Georgia, have subsidized housing, transportation. There is no bus in most rural counties to get people to or into treatment. They have to go every day. So these are some of the huge issues that we're working on. And just to speak with regard to the whole issue of the money that you all gave us at the governor's request last year has been very well spent. We have increased the number of accountability courts substantially, and we have more and more interest throughout the Superior Court, State Court, DUI courts. We haven't really mentioned that. That's a huge thing. People getting monitored and not driving while under the influence and getting treatment. That is a huge big deal. So I think we're making as much progress as we can make. We have to do it carefully, intentionally, and thoughtfully for it to work well. Is that fine? That's probably more than you need.
No, that explains it.
All right, any other questions? All right, what's next?
Next, I'm going to turn it over to Justice Melton.
The next request is for funds for e-filing, and there again, I want to be clear on what this e-filing is compared to other e-filing efforts that you have funded. First, you have funded our efforts to have e-filing at the appellate court level. That is up and running. Attorneys are filing electronically at both the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. Last year, you also funded our request to transmit records electronically. So the trial court records that exist in court, when there's appeal, they could be transmitted to the appellate courts electronically. We are doing that in our court now. We're finalizing that process on the development side. We're going to phase into testing soon, hopefully being going live by mid-year, at least in a few counties. So that's what you've already approved, and we appreciate your assistance there. The e-filing that we're talking about at this point is the ability for litigants, attorneys, pro se, to file in the trial court their documents electronically. And so what would require, we have a diagram that would assist you, is I think you already have this in your package. I tend to be visual. This helps me out a little bit. At the top level here, you have the box that represents litigants. You can imagine thousands of litigants throughout the state, spread out across the state. At the bottom where you see the Georgia trial courts, that would be magistrate, probate, juvenile, state court, superior courts, all throughout the state. Each one of those courts has a management system that they use to manage their cases. Many of those case management systems have a solution that will help with electronic filing. What we're talking about doing is building this orange piece, a portal, that will allow for all those litigants all across the state to go into one portal and have access to those e-filing solutions in the various courts. And the State Bar has requested that whatever e-filing solution that we have would be a single solution that they can kind of go to one spot and be able to file electronically in any court in the state. So what we're asking for are funds necessary to build that, and then this would allow for the filing piece. Following that, the next step would be access, the ability to be able to pull up documents remotely from a lawyer's office or even your office, be able to pull up a case file in Chatham County, for example. So that our request is for funds necessary to accomplish those goals.
All right, question. You've put in a request for the 14 amended. You've also put in a request for the 15. Assuming that both of those were funded, would that just build your portal, or does that start you on the ability to do the remote access?
That builds the portal?
Just the portal?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And
what are we looking at as far as, I presume we've got portal, then we've got remote access, and is there another step beyond that?
There's always more you can add. How far we go in trying to add bells and whistles, I'm not sure at this point. Obviously, when we build a portal with it, we will build it with the idea that access is very much a part of what we're doing. So a lot of that cost will be built into the original build out. I should also say that these monies are for vendors or contractors. These would not be employees of the AOC, but these would be vendors.
All right. For those who are attorneys, is this similar to what the federal court system has with PACER?
Yes.
It would be similar to that.
That is the model that we're trying to follow.
Okay. And what about do all the superior courts have the technology that they need once you get this portal built, or are we going to be sending documents to some kind of black hole out there?
Well, the counties vary wildly. Whether you're talking about municipal court versus superior court, where these superior courts might be located, it all depends on the clerk of the court and the kind of system that they have in place. There are some systems that are very rudimentary. There's some that are very advanced. And so counties are working towards getting to the point where they can have e-filing solutions, and more coming online. And so what the portal will do would be to access those systems that are up and running. If the system isn't up and running, it won't show up on the portal. But if you're there live, you'll be able to access through the portal.
Okay. And I guess that's all. Anybody else have any questions? But with those two allocations for the 14 amended and the 15, that builds the portal.
That's correct.
How much is the remote access going to cost?
Don't know at this point.
Okay. So that's, what, a couple of years down the road? Or?
Yes.
Right. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay. The next item in our priority listing is for the Council of Probate Court Judges. You know that the Administrative Office of the Courts provides services to a number of councils in different ways. The Council of Probate Court Judges, and some of those councils have executive directors in place, and we work closely with them and as far as service provision. With the Council of Probate Court Judges, they have not had a single identified staff person to be their executive director. With the shrinkage of the Administrative Office of the Courts and the reorganization moving around, we were not able to provide to them the level of service that they had been used to, and they felt that the time had come for them to request an executive director. And so that's what this request is for. It is a 14 and 15 in that we would begin the position in the last quarter of this year, and then it would be a full-time position from then on. And I don't believe any of them are here this morning. Yeah, Judge Powell is the president of the council. So.
Okay, Chairman Willard.
Thank you. Ms. Moore, you had this request last year, I believe, and we did not accept it. I think one of the things that we talked about, I see several court administrators in the audience, and we think they do fine work, but I find the work that's done by the various individual courts administrators is duplicative. It's done the same thing by each one of them, setting up meetings, continuing education programs, etc. And I've asked this before, why do we not have a consolidated court directive office that covers really all of our courts, from the Superior Court down to the probate and magistrate courts? Wouldn't that be a better business practice overall?
We are celebrating our 40-year anniversary, and the reason I'm bringing that up is I believe that when we were created 40 years ago, that was the plan, but it hasn't worked that way. We've gone a lot of different ways. We're not a unified judicial system. And
well, isn't it time we got it right?
We want to see consolidation at this point. Legislators look at business practices, and I think the practice of having separate administrators for each court is a poor business practice overall.
I will tell the committee that last year, because that request was there and that issue came up, that we asked the Department of Audits to look into the various councils to determine whether there could be some economy of scale realized by consolidating some of those functions, and we sort of got bumped to the bottom of the list, but we have been informed that they will do that probably after the session is over this year, which means that if we want to wait for their report before we act on this request, we're looking at a delay of another fiscal year, which, we hate to do that for the probate courts, but at the same time, to put in a position that later may be determined to be unnecessary might not be wise either. But just to advise everybody that audit is scheduled now. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The learned chairman of Judiciary cleared it up for me.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? And I'm sorry, I may have cut you off, Chairman Willard. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. What else?
Mr. Powell, Mr. Chairman, let me clarify one thing. You asked, would that request build the portal? That's really for the vendor to build the portal. I don't think we included in here any equipment costs that might be necessary. We just simply don't know what those would be.
But that is a firm number for the vendor?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea on the equipment cost?
I don't think it would be up to this amount. I don't have a firm number. The equipment would be, cloud technology and that kind of thing. So I think we can manage licenses fairly modestly.
That brings another question. Would the state of Georgia own that system?
Yes. Yes. That's the goal with this model, for the state to own the system.
Okay. Any other questions before we move out of the Judicial Council? And I understand the JQC and Resource Center, both of which are listed on your tracking sheets, that neither of them have any budget request for the 14 amended. All right, we have a question from 23.
Just one quick question. You were talking about that built the portal, but it doesn't include the hardware necessarily. That's just for the people that are doing it. What about the maintenance aspect? Is that built in also?
The maintenance, there will be ongoing maintenance costs, and we're discussing how to formulate the structure for that. It could be anything from state funded to attorney funded, based on a per filing, and so we're open to discussions about how we structure the maintenance costs going forward. But there would be something that along those lines going forward.
But this number does not include maintenance costs.
Does not include maintenance costs.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Did you want to make a comment?
Well, we do have one other item in 14, which is the County and Municipal Probation Advisory Council position. That's number 6.
Okay.
That is a position that has been vacant because of loss of funding. But this, the staff for this that works with that council is responsible for going out and doing audits of our misdemeanor probation companies, counties, and municipalities. In 2008, we were able to do about 49 in a year. Last year, we were only able to do 21. There are concerns that we have in not being able to do the auditing that is necessary to do. So we are asking if we can get funding for that position, which has been vacant now for 4 years, full years.
Any questions?
Where is that on the tracking sheet?
I have no
I
idea.
don't know. I don't have a copy of the tracking sheet.
6.5.3.
Okay. Anything else?
I want to thank you for the audience this morning and for your attentive discussion about what the requests are. Presiding Justice Hines, as many of you know, was very, very good at this and did it for many, many years. But when it came PJ, Justice Melton said that he was ready to step up. And so I think he's done it very well. But thank you for your interest and thank you for your concern.
Thank you.
Next, we have juvenile courts.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Kirsten Wallace. I'm the budget director for the Council of Juvenile Court Judges, and this is our executive director, Eric John. Our 2014 amended and 2015 requests are the same. The 2014 is 6 months funding, and the 2015 is for a full year funding. And what it is for is the grants to counties, the juvenile judges' salaries that are pursuant to Code Section 151152. It's just additional funding that is needed for the judges' salaries that are paid to the counties. And that's our request.
Are there questions? Gosh, y'all got us back on schedule.
I'd like to let Chairman Willard know that we did pick up a new judge in Fulton County, as we had talked about last year, so you now have 3 judges there, and that's part of this request.
Good. Just to follow up on something else too, your office doesn't, and the juvenile courts do not administer the grants that are coming out for the community programs, do you?
No, that's coming through the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council
Right.
and the governor's office. We have been helping,
Yeah.
because of our prior grant history, we have been helping identify the counties, the contact persons, so we did work with them closely to get right to the person they needed to get to.
Right.
So.
And just to follow up on that, the monies that you've had in the past that you administered for grants, is that still being done by the court, the juvenile courts, or the juvenile justice office, or do we know? Or is there anything there?
The main grants we were getting were from the governor's office of children and families, and they were federal, and they're doing that still.
Okay, so all that's been consolidated with the other office.
But the state funding is coming directly from criminal justice.
Right.
So there's 2 federal funding and state funding going on. About, what is it, 6 million, something like that now.
Correct.
Which it used to be just $1 million, so
Yeah.
it's a tremendous amount.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Next on our list are Superior Courts.
Good morning. Happy to be here in Atlanta. Savannah, Georgia is not as cold as it is up here, but I bring greetings from the Chatham County Superior Court. With me is Cobb County Superior Court Judge Mary Staley. She's the president-elect of the Council of Superior Court Judges, and we're happy to be here this morning. As you'll see from the information that we provided, our total request for the amended FY 2014 is $445,736. There will be a consistent theme here that will go through each one of the program budgets, and also with our FY 15 request, which I'm certainly glad to address as well. Among the issues that we have is we've had to absorb the cost of the increase in the state health benefit plan, and we're asking for an increase in our budget in order to cover those costs of health insurance. We also are asking for, it's essentially a restoration request, $12,914. We weren't able to cover our rent to the state government last year out of our planned budget. So with the increase in the cost of travel, mileage, office supplies, replacing equipment, all of those things for the Council of Superior Court Judges, we're requesting to be restored funds of $12,914. Any questions about the Council of Superior Court Judge
requests.
If I'm not mistaken, and I may be incorrect, and if I am, I'm going to ask Brian to correct me. But my understanding is that the employer share of the state health benefit plan was something that went to all agencies across the board, and we have not reimbursed any of those agencies for that increased cost. And I'm just curious as to why the Council of Superior Court judges might think that they ought to be treated differently.
I can't specifically answer that question, but there were no funds added to our budget for that increase in FY14. That's why in the amended request we're asking for it. Whether other state departments and agencies have had that restored to them or had that added.
According to our budget, Alan, it's not.
Well, we're asking. We understand. We understand. I hear you.
Doesn't hurt to ask.
I hear you on that one. Okay. So just let me say that I will not repeat that request again, although it is included in the information that we have asked. The next item that we have is on behalf of the judicial administrative districts. There are 10 in Georgia. We used to have 10 congressional districts, and so the judicial districts were created essentially to fall in line with those congressional districts many, many years ago.
40 years ago.
Yes, yes, we know that. Ms. Moore helped us out on that one. So the that budget was cut substantially, 52% actually, during the rough days that the state has experienced. And I know we're not completely out of that yet. So the request includes restoration of the 3 furlough days that have been in place now for a number of years. I think you are all aware that judges took furlough days in the first year, and because if our employees were going to be furloughed, we were going to be furloughed. It meant shutting down court services. It literally shut down Superior Court, which in the long run, not a good idea, because you want to keep moving cases through, given the staggering load of particularly criminal and domestic cases. But in any event, we did that, and we've had those 3 furlough days in the JAD budget and in the Superior Court budget, and we're asking for those to be restored. Also, the JAD is asking for 25% of the previous cuts to their budget to be restored. That's a total of $67,500. Be happy to answer questions about that. And I know, Chairman Willard, you already have raised a question about whether or not there are duplication of services, and I'm more than happy to address that issue.
My concern, Judge, is that we've changed population. You're right, these were set up by congressional districts, which were based on population 40 years ago. We've changed sizes, populations, and I just wonder, is there a need to do some changing of as far as the makeup of these districts that we have today?
We've looked at that issue, and that issue has been brought forward to us. Judge Hamill, in particular, has worked on that issue. One of the things that I have looked at is quantity and quality are 2 different things. Mm-hmm. We have parts of the state of Georgia which are dramatically underserved in terms of resources. There are vast portions of Georgia that simply just don't have the resources because of the poverty issues, the lack of employment opportunities. And what you find in many of those areas is that the counties are not going to support the court services. They can't afford it. They are struggling themselves to pay for what they have to pay for. So without the district court administrators who serve as court administrators for virtually every county in their districts, that means they run the accountability courts. That means they handle all the conflict issues. That means they handle all of the issues of trying to get judges appointed when we're recused. They do everything that essentially an administrative assistant would do for a well-funded county. So the differences in population don't necessarily tell the whole story, because you have to look at, if you are in a 26-county district in a very poor area of Georgia, it is dramatically different from being in I'm not going to say northern county, I'm not going to pick one out, but where the counties are able, yeah, okay, you'll volunteer, Cobb County, okay, where the county is more able and willing to provide the kind of support that is needed to administer what is really a staggeringly larger, not just the caseload, but the amount of time it takes. Chairman Wheeler, you know well the child support issues.
Oh, yes.
The increase in the workload on that alone.
Right. And I appreciate what you're saying about the varying loads, and do we have really recognition in how we allocate funding based upon this variance of loads and abilities financially with the county's assistance or not. For instance, we have Fulton and DeKalb are individual districts almost by themselves. I think DeKalb and Rockdale's a district. So my point is, do we say, okay, 10 districts, we take the pie and cut it in 10 equal shares, or do we have recognition that you have a district that is financially strapped, we'll call it, because of lack of support from the counties? Do we recognize a way within these districts to do a funding that really meets the needs for all areas? Tell me that.
The parity is important, and ensuring
Parity how?
Parity in terms of providing the services, the court services, to everybody so they have access. Fairness.
Right.
Rapid dispositions of cases. Quite frankly, I think we do a remarkable job individually in our counties, and we have dedicated public servants. Redrawing the districts would not, well, let me just say this. I think it would have to be more than just population that you have to look at. And that is something we're more than willing to look at.
And parity doesn't mean population per se. Parity, again, back to where the need is, the dollar needs are. And
exactly.
I say your Fulton district may not need the same as the Oconee or another district. I'm just trying to use some examples, of course. And that's I'm asking, do we take this pie and divide it equally into 10 districts, or do we recognize funding where that need is within the specific districts?
I think that's an excellent question, and I think there needs to be some serious analysis of where the funding is going.
Who does that? The court should do it.
Well,
right?
We looked at it. We've studied it. Right now, we think the system that we have, with adequate funding, which we have to ask you for. I mean, we depend on you all for this, but we think the system right now is working well, given that the wealthier counties pay from county funds.
All right. Back to my question: do we divide that pie up equally, 10 shares, or how do we do it?
You can't divide it up equally if you have different county expenditures. I mean, in terms of the state funding, state funding should be equal, but you've still got to look at how much the counties are putting in or not putting in. And so it's got to be weighted. It has to be weighted.
And so Fulton and DeKalb have to pay their share, but other counties who don't have the assets or the ability to pay like Fulton and DeKalb do, or Cobb, they don't pay their share and the state pays theirs?
The county doesn't have the money, and therefore the state is paying. It's a base rate, essentially. It's what you've been paying for many, many years to ensure that the people out in those areas of Georgia that don't have the resources, that they receive the same benefit as people in those other counties.
Okay.
Judge Staley,
we will have an opportunity when we talk about the 15 to maybe delve into this a little bit deeper, but
Can I add one little point?
Yes, ma'am.
What we found when we did our analysis, because we had the same concerns, and I'm in the 7th Judicial District. We have 32 judges that represent the northwest corner of the state. We have the largest number of judges in our district, and so we would probably have the greatest concern for realignment. And we took a look at this. What you see is it's kind of remarkable. In the districts, you will have a county with a lot of resources like Cobb. We have our own court administrator. That takes the burden off of the district court administrator for the 7th district, and she's able to serve on up into northwest Georgia without needing to serve 10 judges in Cobb County. And that happens in the middle part of the state with Macon. It happens over in Augusta. It happens down in Chatham County in the 1st District. For some odd reason, even though the districts are antiquated back 40 years, there's a confluence of the more affluent cities being able to support these districts through their court administration. And it all balances out, and we've looked at this several times and tend to be satisfied that underserved areas are supported by the more affluent county centers within their districts. It's interesting.
I agree, Judge. You really make my case. You don't need to have a full court administrator district for Cobb County because you've already taken care of it locally.
Yeah.
So there's not a need there for that inclusion. We'll talk about it later, but I agree with what you're saying. I just wonder, how do we divide up the responsibilities between those varying districts?
I think we're very amenable, if I can speak for Judge Abbott. She's our president, but I'm talking. So you know how judges are. We're very interested in looking at this and being frugal with tax dollars.
All right, anything else on the 14 amended?
The only other thing is on the Superior Court request, we have 1% for the state health benefit request and restoration of the furlough days for our state paid employees. That includes court administrators, secretaries, law clerks, and then we're eliminating from the budget the one-time expenses that were set aside for Piedmont development site.
All right, Judge Crosby has a question.
Well, I really have just a comment on the last issue about the funding for some of we have some rural counties down in my part of the state that we have heard recently from school superintendents and the principals. We've got schools that are literally going bankrupt in certain parts of the state. And so, if they can't pay for the school for these children, they certainly can't provide these other services. But anyhow, I just wanted to make that comment. Appreciate your concern in that.
Representative Williams.
I thank the judge for his comments. I live in Liberty County, the Atlantic Judicial Circuit, relatively close to Savannah, but I certainly see a great disparity in many rural counties. You have people languishing in jail because there's such a backlog, and I'm very interested, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be getting with you in learning more about this because I really want to, because justice should be justice, whether it's in Willacoochee or downtown Atlanta.
All right, anything else, questions or comments from the judges? Thank y'all very much. We will come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Supreme Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Hugh Thompson, Chief Justice of Georgia, and to my right is Presiding Justice Harris Hines from Marietta. We have Justice Melton from our court, our clerk, Ms. T. Barnes, wonderful clerk she is. Her Chief Deputy, Ms. Tia Milton, was here earlier and right behind her, and Ms. Regina Jones, who is our fiscal officer. I want to first of all thank you very, very much for your consideration last year and giving us a third and additional death penalty clerk. That's going to make a tremendous difference for us. And we really appreciate your support on that. For amended FY14, we really have, I think, two very modest requests. One is that back in 2009, in the really throes of the Great Recession, we closed our law library. And we do all of our research now online with West or Lexis. They have raised our fee for the year, $1,344. And we need coverage for that so that we can continue working electronically on research. The second thing we need is we need commercial document destruction. We get a lot of paper over there. We're, as you know, are archiving everything we can. We're still archiving old records, but we have a lot of paper records that, once archived, need to be destroyed. We have been saving those since last September. We've got them tucked away in every nook and cranny over there in the court. And there is a commercial, bonded, licensed document construction company that we can contract with that will give us appropriate certificates that these have been destroyed. And they have a monthly rate of $2,284, and we need it for this amended year for a period of 10 months, which would destroy everything from September forward. And those are our only two requests for FY 14.
Even though we've got like 3 months left in the fiscal year, you're asking for 10 months appropriation for this year?
Well, fiscal year would go through June, would it not?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we need the first 6 months of this year plus 4 months in last year because we've been saving since September. And it would be to destroy everything that we've been saving since September. That's 4 months back into last calendar.
Okay. Any questions?
And that would be, these would both be continuations into FY 15.
I would say that would be an ongoing.
It would be, yes. We just don't have a facility to destroy all that stuff. And this seems to be the most appropriate, most fiscally responsible way to do it and be sure that these documents are, in fact, adequately destroyed and removed from anyone's eyes.
Mr. Chairman, let me say, having come from a private background in practice and having also some banking background myself, it's like this. When hard times came, the Supreme Court of Georgia really reduced its budget, and I would put it up against any other entity. And when you said get lean, we really got lean. Everybody understands that when you get real lean, if you ever try to come back, you're starting from behind on others. And I think, as I said, these are the only two requests that we have for an entire court. And I think with our fiscal officer and our clerk have been exceedingly good stewards of public money. Truth be told, I think we have punished ourselves somewhat. And I hope there will be a time that parity can be brought to what. I apologize. I'm not speaking loud enough. I've got a little problem with my throat this time of year. But I do hope that there will be a time that we can be brought back. We cut positions very much. Talked about furloughed. Yes, when the judges were furloughed, came to work still. We did, but we did reduce that too when the times were there. So we have tried to be good stewards of the money, and I personally believe our record reflects good stewardship.
Okay, let me ask you one question before we move off of that. As we get into the e-filing, will this become less necessary or the contract rate go down as you generate fewer documents?
We hope so, but we can't. I mean, I think it's going to be a phase-in sort of thing, and I hope that in the years to come it will be something.
Okay. All right. Y'all don't have a whole lot different in your 15 than your 14, and I think that we've allotted the public defenders 30 minutes, which I don't think we're going to need, and I don't think they want to take. So why don't you talk about the 3 additional things that you are that you're going to do in the 15, if you don't mind.
Talking about first thing we would really like is an additional fiscal. We only have one fiscal officer for the whole board. Tremendous responsibility, tremendous duties, tremendous amount of work that has to be done. And just to be sure that we adequately do everything we really need to do, we're asking for an additional person to help in the fiscal department. That would require money of $64,156.
Is this a new position, or is this one that was cut back in the austerity times?
It will be a new position.
Okay.
We feel very strongly that the responsibilities of those duties require us to have leadership. I don't know of any other agency or any other branch of government that has just one fiscal officer that looks after the whole duty that they're required to do.
And Mr. Chairman, along that line, certainly with the AOC, but with the court, when you get a lot of, say, when you're getting grants or something from a federal government, and Chairman Willard is certainly familiar with, like the Justice for Children Project and others, but they will require, and the AOC does an awful lot of this, we appreciate that, but they require it to come through like the entity of the Supreme Court. That's why I would chair that committee or something like that. So those numbers are, it's very helpful.
Are there questions from the committee on that one position? All right, next.
We think too that going forward with the increased caseload that we have and the increased complexity of cases that are presented to us. I mean, I tell people all the time, if I look back at the reports from 20 years ago when I first came on board, or glad just time came on board, those cases really look like stick figures compared to the complexity of cases that we see now. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to get more justices on the board because, again, I use the analogy of sort of like a bag race. All the judges have a leg in the bag, and the bag is the law, and we fuss and fight about where the bag's going to go, but we have to do it all together. And if you put two more legs in the bag, it just moves that much more complex. But what we really do need going forward, I think, is more clerks, more legal assistants. And we are asking for 2 floaters, people that you heard Judge Phipps talk about, they need a couple more because people get sick from time to time, and that happens just this last fall. And we get really, really complex cases from time to time, more frequently now than in the past. We get a lot of certified questions from the 11th Circuit, we get a lot of certified questions from the federal courts. Case complexity is really increased tremendously. And we need help in research, we need help in that department. If we had 2 additional law assistants, then we could farm those out to different judges as the need arose and help us meet our responsibilities of getting cases out in 2 terms. You know, we're required to do that. And so we have a time frame to work in that we have very, very complex cases to work. And we really think that 2 additional law assistants would help us immeasurably work those cases out.
Mr. Chairman, let me comment on that. The Constitution of Georgia allows for up to 9 members on this court. You'd have to have enabling legislation. We've had 7 members on the Supreme Court of Georgia since 1945. Georgia is now about the 9th most populous state. I don't think this, and the U.S. Supreme Court has actually been reducing the cases that they turn out each year. Now, they pretty much write one, but I'd say it used to be 120, now it's between 80 and 100. We're probably 60 plus cases per justice per year. And when you're dealing with death penalties and things like that, as a judge who sat on a trial bench and tried them, that might take you a total time of over a month. And when it gets here, I do not think, and with the 2-term rule, we're the only appellate courts I know anywhere in the world that has a 2-term rule. Now, truth be told, we got a little wiggle room that we can increase the term. It'd be candid for one case. Superior Court judge couldn't do that. But I do not know of anything more important than we do right now that we would need more than additional law clerks. It really is. It's at that point that it's just critical to try to get it out. And as the Chief said, the complexity of case, when you talk about derivative lawsuits, I mean, a stockholder derivative suit or something coming now, it is very complicated.
23.
Mr. Chief Justice, when we're talking about these 2 additional attorneys being added, how would you consider the level of their experience? Would you be hiring experienced attorneys or entry-level attorneys, or how would that work out?
We would hire the very best that we could afford.
Okay, I appreciate that. I was just, and I'm new to this, and I'm just kind of looking at the numbers, and I was looking at the numbers that you had allocated versus the Court of Appeals numbers, and I noticed that the Court of Appeals numbers for the attorneys they wanted to hire were higher, and they said it was because of a level of experience.
Well, I think that they are trying to get.
I'm not going to try to pit the two of y'all against each other. I'm not that stupid.
yeah, right.
You said we're coming in lower is what you're saying.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'm very impressed with that.
Well, I think both boards are trying to address the needs that they have. And we would, I think, appreciate whatever help you could give us. And as I say, we'll hire the best we can afford.
Well, I'm sitting here looking at the numbers, and based on that, it looks like you're coming in at about $128,000 per attorney, but that includes benefits and everything else, which probably brings it down to about $75,000 to $78,000 per attorney. Would that be a fair
I
assumption?
think you're looking at 80 to 110, 80 for Supreme Court and 110 for Court of Appeals.
Salary of $80,000.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right, Judge Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How busy are y'all compared with the other Supreme Courts in the other states?
Well,
We might be
the
the top.
University of
Chicago,
Chicago
shall we?
rated us the number one productive Supreme Court in the country just a few years ago. And if you look at the United States Supreme Court, it has a caseload of about 3,000 cases roughly every year. And they write about 80,000 opinions for all their judges. I'm talking about total. And we write in the neighborhood of 350.
That's what I'm putting down. I thought we ought to be able to get the thing done on
We
one
do that
shot.
around 60 opinions per judge per year. About 20%. It's very, very high.
I just think we just take the position.
We know of some boards that don't write, maybe 30 opinions.
Do it all at one shot. Get some economy
So
of scales. We don't have to make 12.
I ask people, I see people all the time, and I say, "Who think Texas is doing?" Well, of course I think that's what I'm doing.
I think that's what's happened.
I said, I want you to know you get the
saw
bargain out of me. We work hard. Full Fields works hard too. They consistently rate very high, I think, in the production that they do for what they do. But for the last appellate court in any state, we are consistently right up with anyone. And it's just, Simon Justin Hannah said, I think we may have moved over to number 8 in population now. And so you would expect, everyone would expect that if you've got a big population, you're going to get a lot of activity in the court system. The more activity you have in the court system, the more appeals you're going to have. And it's, the numbers are coming. We're going to have more. And we're moving. We're trying to figure out how to get ahead of the curve. And as P.J. Hannah said, it doesn't make really a whole lot of sense to go to 9 justices on the Supreme Court. We don't have political plan for it. We don't have anything for it. We don't have support for it. But what we do need is more assistance that will help us discharge our duties and responsibilities. And, I think that with this direction, that we can cover the bases for years to come. Now, we may come back in a few more years and say we need some more votes. Or we may need to bump up our central staff, or we may come back for another death penalty clerk or something like that. But we will come to you piecemeal as we really proceed with these.
They would make less than you make, wouldn't they?
It'd be really close. We'll talk about that next year, I think. But we really do, I think, earnestly believe, for the personal report, this is a proper record. Get more staff attorneys, more people. I mean, if we could come to you and ask, say, for an additional clerk for every justice on the court, we each have 2. they get me free, and I'm able to sort of share my action with other officers, which we did last fall. But we're not to the stage where we need an additional one for each justice yet, but we do need some that we can share among ourselves.
And to be candid with you, this is something that probably every justice could use, certainly another clerk. I think that's something that we will continue to come with to you on, because it is where you can get the most relief quick and do it with an additional clerk. It can help you more than anything else. And that's why, in all honesty, yes, lady and gentlemen, we'll be coming to you with that in the future.
Chairman Willard.
Just following up on that, Justice Hines, what historically was the number of clerks, or what did you all go through as far as the Great Recession and changes of numbers?
I think our clerk will have that, but I think we reduced down in the clerk's office about 5 positions, did we not?
But specifically your law clerk.
Well, 8. It was 8 positions we reduced down.
And your law clerks?
No, that was not the law clerks. No, sir, we did not reduce the law clerks. As I said, I cannot remember. I could say I came on board in 1995, and the chief did too. Everybody had 2 law clerks then, and the chief had 3. We still have that same number now.
Okay.
And obviously the volume of cases has increased. Now, I'm talking, when I say that, these are chambers clerks. This is not central staff, please understand.
Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, judges. I'm not going to get into the clerks because I know how efficient y'all work and how diligent. I want to ask your fiscal officer a question. As usual, I'm not getting into the clerks. I'm the one who has to get into the trash. So, if you could, let me ask a question. You know, and I understand the document destruction and the need for that, but I'm sitting there, I'm looking, you're asking in the supplemental for the rest of the year, $22,800, and then 27 for the next year. Do y'all contract with the company on a monthly basis? Is it a straight contract price, or is it by the pound? Isn't this usually by the pound in the tonnage?
That is based on volume, so we would have so many bins set up throughout the offices, and it's based on calculations that we've done. Again,
So regardless of what the amount is, they charge the same per month?
it is going to be the same per month based on the bins, but however, if in the future we can reduce that paper volume down, as we talked about earlier, then that would reduce that monthly cost. But currently, the paper volume we do have, this would be the monthly cost for fiscal year 14A and 15 as we have it, based on the contract that we have with the company that they estimate.
Let me rephrase it then. All right, so y'all pay or you contract with a paper destruction company, and they gave the contract price y'all have is for a certain volume.
Correct.
No matter whether you put a half a tub out there per month or you fill them up.
Absolutely, but
Right.
again, that would be based on clearly already the documents that we have collected that we've got in storage right now waiting to be destructed. So we have a very good estimate, having the company look at that as to what our needs are with the bins that we have out monthly, and that could be addressed and reduced if needed.
So the backlog of documentation that needs to be destroyed right now is a pretty voluminous.
Yes, we've been collecting that probably for the last 4 months, since September, and so that's why 10-month calculation came in.
So they haven't been picking up, or there's just been that much more volume has been?
That's correct. We've actually not, we've gotten an estimate as far as the cost. Since we had not been assured of the funding, we don't have the contract in place yet, but we've got a contract ready to go.
Guess what I'm asking then, as far as in the supplemental, have y'all gotten a price on just one price of picking up all of it, not trying to farm it out over a period of months, but just get rid of all of it, a contracted price to get it all cleaned up at one time, all the documentation.
The documentation that we already have in storage, no, we don't have a price just based on the volume of storage that we have currently. We just had a monthly contract price that they gave us, and based on
that we know we've already stored for 4 months. That's our calculation.
And I guess what I'm suggesting is to get rid of all this volume of extra paperwork that needs to be destroyed. Why don't you just get one bid? Tell them we want to get caught up, find out what that bid is, to pick up every bit of it, get it caught up, and then go to that monthly, fee for the full fiscal year.
That's a great suggestion. Actually, I discussed that with Brian, and we have looked into that, but we have not gotten an answer back. So as of right now, this is our best estimate based on the monthly volume we've been storing. But of course, it will be picked up in one time, and it potentially may be less.
All right, one more question about trash, and then we'll leave trash. The documents that we are shredding are intercourt memos, or are they stuff that's public record anyway?
No, it's everything. As I say, we're archiving things now, and the paper is being destroyed as we archive it. And we have intercourt documents that are collected and they'll be destroyed. It's everything that goes into the thing. I'm amazed every month how many times we
You're getting paper for 7 judges, and Mr. Chairman, let's just say you've got opinions drafted, and they are there that are going to go out in a little bit. You need to shred those things, certainly, you know, the memos that go with those, that the research has gone in there, the inter-office memos. Years ago, I heard a person in the bank say, we came on with online banking and all this. It's going to reduce the number of checks that are written. Probably the number of checks that are written now are more than even then. We still generate an awful lot of paper.
Everything that's filed is archived or will be archived. And once it's archived, then the physical aspect of that will be destroyed.
Okay. The computer software request in 15 is the new platform that you were talking about?
Yes.
All right, and the need for that is why?
The longevity of Novell is somewhat in question. They've been bought out, and then the ability to support the services that we currently have is in question. We feel like Microsoft offers us a better long-term stability going forward.
All right, and this price will not only purchase the software, but purchase for the conversion of the existing? And then the other new question, or new request you've got is the National Center for State Courts. That's an increase in dues, or is that a new?
It's just, that's our portion of the cost. And it's based strictly on population. As we get more people, they give us a little bit higher bill.
Okay.
And this is similar to the organization, National Organization of Legislators and National Governors Association. We still feel that we get good value for our dollar in that. But it's strictly based on population, and it's our population increase, they raise their fees.
Okay. Any other questions for the Supreme Court? Thank you all.
Thank you for your consideration.
Public defenders. Tell us about your budget.
Good morning, Chairman and Representative Senators. Thank you for allowing me to meet with you today. I'm Travis Sackerson. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Public Defender Standards Council. I know that a number of you are on our Legislative Oversight Committee or have been folks that we've worked with in the past and probably feel like you see too much of me. I will tell you that we were blocked off from 9:10 to 9:40 for that 30 minutes, and Chairman Powell told me yesterday that that was an error, and made it clear that if I spoke for 30 minutes that he would physically harm me. So with that said, I'll try to be as brief as possible. We are the agency that oversees all of the public defender offices around the state, along with the Capitol Defender and the Office of Mental Health Advocate. And we are also an executive branch agency, which means that we've been working with the Office of Planning and Budget and the Governor's Office on a number of projects, zero-based budgeting, along with our budget this year. And so unlike the other agencies you've heard from this morning, we're part of the Governor's recommendation and that process. We have, I think, a few changes from our budget before as it relates to the amended. And I don't know if, Mr. Chairman, do you want to talk about just the amended or both?
Both.
Okay. Then as it relates to the amended for 14, we do have some changes. You'll see we have two programs in our budget. Program 1 is the council program is what we call that. That's the Capitol Defender's Office mostly, which we have successfully reorganized over the last few years and have had some great success with that. The Office of Mental Health Advocate, which we are presently in the process of reorganizing, and then the smaller, the administrative office of our agency, which we streamlined when I took over 3 years ago. The line explains that it relates to the $340,000 increased funds to eliminate furlough days. We took 3 furlough days last year. Agency-wide, that's a cost of about $100,000 a day for us, and so that is the representation for that so that we can avoid.
All right, let me stop you there. You've got 340 in the amended, and you've got 340 in the 15. So what you're doing is you're collecting a whole year of furlough days in the amended?
Well, I think that you also, if you look at our budget too, and I have a handout about this if you want it. I don't know. I didn't think you wanted it after we discussed that yesterday. But I think it also relates to an issue with the Clerks and Sheriff's Trust Fund for us because that number actually is closely tied. It's the same amount as what used to represent a non-appropriated funding source. We were one of the agencies that was allowed to take advantage of the Clerks and Sheriffs through the Council Superior Court, or excuse me, Clerk's Authority. And that used to be about a $2 million resource.
We were talking about furlough days.
Resource. I was just explaining that I think that it may also be related to a dramatic loss in funding in Program 1 for us on that too. And it seems the numbers seem to correspond with that, so it may have a relationship there.
Okay.
But yes, I mean, it is in both years to try and make sure that we don't have to this year and we won't have to next year.
We'll check that out. Okay. All right.
And we did talk to Brian.
Conflict cases.
Program 2 for us is our much larger program, and that's the Public Defender program, all the public defender offices around the state, as well as conflicts. And I would say that on the public defender side, we made a great deal of progress. We inherited about more than 30 frozen positions when we took over, and more than 20 of those were attorney positions, which is obviously a real problem. We've been able to eliminate that number over the last 3 years, but at the same time our conflicts have been increasing. And so we have a conflict for us also. Let me explain for those of you who aren't attorneys what that means is that ordinarily if you're charged with a crime and you go to jail, you'd be assigned a public defender. There may be ethical or professional reasons why that public defender has a conflict and can't represent you. The issue that we went through for a number of years with the State Bar was whether or not our public defender offices would be considered the same thing as a law firm. The State Bar originally sided with the opinion that we were not the same thing as a law firm because we don't have the the same push for attorneys' fees that other law firms might have, and so there are a number of states that have that same position, and so originally that was their position. After they sent it out for comment, they changed that position where something called the Formal Advisory Opinion 10-1 was issued, which said we were the same thing as a law firm, which meant that those conflicts would be imputed to everyone in the office. That is, the opinion was ratified by the Supreme Court in April of last year, and so for us, we averaged about 9,500 conflict cases a year for the 3 years leading up to that. Last year, that ticked up because of May and June to about 10,000. This year, we're projecting about 15,000 conflict cases, cases that of the roughly 125,000 cases that we handle a year, we won't be able to represent in the public defender offices. We have to represent outside the offices, and that's more costly for us. So that increased number is an increased cost for us, and the additional funding that the governor put in his recommendation is for that increase.
Which begs the question, why is it not in the 15?
Well, we have the numbers for this year, and we know what our projection is going to be for this year. Next year, as we move forward, by the end of this year, it won't be a projection. We'll have a hard number for what we anticipate our conflicts being this year and every year. And so it will be something we probably will have to address in the amended, but it won't be a projection, and it'll be a hard number. And so I think that we will probably have to come back and address it at that time.
I thought that's what a budget was a projection. All right, any questions for public defenders? 17, Representative Chairman Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Saxon, I appreciate you being here, and I was just looking through the amended budget. Looks like to me that the Prosecuting Attorneys Council has a budget of $63,501,014, and you guys have a total budget, total state funds in this budget of $43,147,762. Is that right?
That's correct, Chairman.
What is the ratio of cases that throughout the state that you defend versus the cases, the criminal cases that are filed?
About 85 to 90%.
Okay. I can do that math pretty quick, I think.
If you'd like to give me $10 million today, we could make up the difference.
You'd be up to 85% of the PAC budget?
Right.
Okay. All right. That's my point.
And I will thank you and the governor's office and the legislature. They've been very supportive over the last 3 years, and we've made a great deal of progress. And you know, the goal is to try to get to that number, and we're getting closer every year.
We may not do anything in the 15, but if you would give us a projection of what you think the additional conflict money would be to both the Senate and the House Budget Office, we would appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Mr. Attorney General. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman, Senators, Representatives. Our pleasure to be here. With me is Ann Bentley, who heads the administrative division of our office. Representative Powell, is it my understanding you want me to comment on both the little budget and the big budget? Okay, well, I'll be happy to do so. We had a series of discussions with both the governor, the governor's office, and OPB. And as a result of those discussions, as a result of the discussions in the prior years, we frankly requested changes in the 15. We requested no changes in the little budget, and the governor's office and OPB have submitted no changes in the little budget, and we're perfectly fine. That's consistent with our request. We were looking for improvements in the fiscal 15, so 0 is the change in the little, and we would greatly appreciate your support in keeping it at 0. With regard to the 15, we have come before you in prior years talking about our inability to retain counsel and the stress that puts on our office. My first full year, we lost 13% of our lawyers. Our second year, we lost 19%. Through the end of the calendar year, one half of the state's fiscal year, I had lost approximately 20% of the office in half a year. We are totally non-competitive with other governments. I'm not referencing private practice. I'm not trying to compete with private practice. We were sometimes more than once a week losing a lawyer to other state agencies, in particular with the occasional transfer to another government agency.
Let me interrupt you at this point. We heard from the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals before you came in, and they are requesting new staff positions ranging from $80,000 to $110,000. What's the average a salary for attorneys in your office?
My guess is 65. Okay. Our starting salary is 50. There is tremendous pressure on hiring new lawyers because if they have any type of debt, they can't work in our office. I can't compete because they can't pay their bills. And none of our lawyers have gotten a raise in 6 years, but for someone retiring in a promotion, which would apply to maybe 3 lawyers at that point. We've literally been in a position where we have at times gone several months filling a position because we can't find the quality of the applicant to fill the position. Thankfully, if you look at the 15 budget after the meetings with the governor's office and OPB, they've made a request that we're very comfortable with in our ability to stop the bleeding in order to help. The real problem I've noticed in my third year is the lawyers that I'm losing the most are the lawyers that are, say, in the 10 to 15 year frame. Those are the lawyers who provide the most value to the office. They are independent. They can take on cases. They can go in the courtroom. Those are the lawyers that when I leave, that when they leave, they put added pressure on SAG and SAG costs. So it's really essential that I keep the lawyers that we've trained and who have the experience, and those were the ones I was losing the most the first half of the fiscal year. And as I've mentioned, the governor's recommendation to y'all with OPB's assistance and our staff, we are very comfortable with, very supportive of. We're not requesting any changes from the governor's proposed budget.
For those who may not be familiar, it's your obligation to provide services to state agencies, executive branch, and defense, prosecution, et cetera. And if you don't have the staff to do it, then you have to go out and hire outside attorneys at probably a greater cost.
Much greater cost, sir.
All right, so it's penny wise and pound foolish to understaff you. Would that be a correct statement?
That is correct, but the point I need to make is that the governor and his staff and OPB have frankly worked with us exceedingly well in the request for fiscal year 15.
All right, Chairman Willard.
Tell us today, what is your total approved slots of attorneys in your office? Because we did an increase several years ago, I know.
I believe it's, excuse me, 139.
And what is the vacancy you have at the moment? How many do you have actually on staff out of the 139?
3 or 4, sir.
Not in place, so you got slots open on about 3 or 4? But the turnover is what you're
I had an
concerned.
interview earlier this week. I believe there's an interview scheduled next week. Those are openings where we're in the process of seeking to fill.
Okay, so out of your 139 slots, roughly 135 are filled, but your turnover issue is where you really run the problem. You say it's running about 20% a year?
No. It was 20% for the first half year.
First half year.
Of this current fiscal year. The prior year, it was 19%. But what was so alarming was as the economy started to improve, we saw a skyrocketing in the resignation letters. That was so critical. Now, in the governor's request for 15, there's also a request for additional positions in the Medicaid fraud unit. We were maybe the only state I can't swear to that, that did not have a separate civil side to medical fraud as compared to solely criminal, and it was felt that it was needed to open a civil section. We have one lawyer that we have placed in the civil section, and we're already seeing significant gains. So the new positions that are requested specifically in the Medicaid fraud unit will more than pay for themselves in providing money back to DCH. So that additional money will provide much more money to DCH and be a cost savings to the state.
Representative Williams.
I have a question with a quick follow-up. How much did you spend on outside counsel last fiscal year?
It's about $35 million. It's frankly a combination of several things, Representative Williams. It is about 45% generally every year are the defects child support issues where those lawyers thankfully work for the state for between $52.50 and $55 an hour. And they do an excellent job throughout the 159 counties of our state, day in and day in, going to those courtrooms. There are a group of cases such as GDOT condemnations where it is appropriate to have local counsel to assist in doing a better job for a state with their prospective jury verdicts. There are the cases that are where you need a specialist, where we, for instance, go to DC, where it's a federal issue, where, you know, candidly, that's where the expertise is. Sometimes that relates to issues with the Board of Regents, for instance, with some of their technical issues. And then there's the cases where, candidly, we don't have sufficient staff in the office in that regard. There's also the occasional lawsuit that is unexpected. So, for instance, we had, as well as expected, we had additional costs in the past year because we went through redistricting, and by definition that requires communication with the Department of Justice. For the first time in the state's history, that process was resolved without litigation. A suit was filed, everything was stayed, and there was a total settlement with the Justice Department. So it actually saved the state significant sums of money. But there are unexpected things to come up, i.e., when the governor of Florida has a press conference that he's suing the state of Georgia for water in the U.S. Supreme Court, that certainly is not something we can budget, but that is certainly something you want us to vigorously defend. So the reason I'm expounding in a little detail, Representative, is due to the fact that it's so dependent on litigation, there's certain litigation we can't anticipate, but that we need to retain counsel in concert with our office to do the best job for our state.
The follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Giving consideration to those things you can't anticipate and those things that you just have to farm out, have you looked at what you normally spend because of shortage in staff and presented the difference in what it costs us outside and what it costs us inside? And I might say that while I have great respect for the defects lawyers, the $50 and $52 lawyers are usually about what they're worth. But go right ahead.
So with all candor, I respectfully disagree with the representative. When you can find a lawyer to work for you for $52.50 or $55 an hour and go in that local courtroom and protect the citizens and protect the children, I think we get an unbelievable.
I didn't say that was their true worth. Sometimes
no. I'm just amazed that we're able to find the lawyers that will do that work for us day in and day out. We have, in fact, looked at that, but once again, it is so variable depending on the year and the type of litigation, so that from one year to another, you could see a significant difference in that regard.
All right, one more question.
Mr. Attorney General, you may not be able to answer this, but just out of curiosity, do you have maybe a time frame, length of time that you said people are running in and out? It's like a revolving door. What's probably the length of time for a stay with you as an attorney coming out?
Well, it's changed. Normally, it's within 5 years, but with the recession, we were actually keeping people, as close to 10 years. But those are the people that are starting to leave now. So I'm assuming.
So it's not like they're leaving every other month or anything like that. I mean, as far as.
They are now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, literally, we've had some of those. But keep in mind, to clarify her answer, there are certain sections of my office where I can take a new lawyer, and we could teach them to do that law well. there are sections of my office, such as the tax section, where I can't take a new lawyer. I need an experienced lawyer who knows tax law. So when she's saying that, for instance, 5 years, that doesn't mean they're a new lawyer working 5 years. It means 5 years in our office. And it's really, in several of the areas that we work, for instance, the constitutional law area, the tax area, as two quick examples, I don't need young lawyers in those sections. I need lawyers that can very adequately defend the state of Georgia with years of experience before they choose to come to our office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? That is completing all of our list for this morning. We will reconvene at 12:30. Any closing remarks, Chairman Kausner? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.